Welcome to What's Next with Mattel Creations. We are excited to be at VCon today. We are talking to thought leaders and artists to talk about all things toys, art, and entertainment. I'm Jess Kirkman, this is Ethan Wood, and I'm happy to introduce Gary Baseman, who's here with us today.
Hello, everyone.
Gary doesn't need a lot of introductions. I mean, you're amazing. Your work in fine art. It's true. You've got Emmys. You've got BAFTAs, you've done TV shows, you've done fine arts, you're at the vanguard of designer toys, right at the onset. I mean, you've done tons of stuff. You created the illustrations for Cranium. You've had a long and illustrious career, and we've had the opportunity to start working on something together. And while we can't necessarily talk about that right now, it's just a pleasure to be working with you. So before we get into some of these other questions, the first question, now that we're in lovely Los Angeles, sun shining, you grew up here. And I want to know a little bit about, growing up in Los Angeles and the effect of companies like Mattel or Disney or Hanna-Barbera had on inspiration for you.
Right. Well, Los Angeles played a very big role in who I am. I grew up in the Fairfax district, but also growing up in LA, you're growing up with this legacy. You know, this is where Disney started. This is where Mattel started. And as a little kid, you couldn't, at least for me, not be inspired by all this around you. And it was all directed to children. But for me, ever since I was a little kid, all I ever wanted to be was an artist. And I never imagined myself as anything but an artist. So growing up, being given, my first doll that I loved more than anything was a Casper doll from Mattel. Going to Disneyland, my parents would allow me to go to Disneyland once a year. So I would wait for that one day that I got to go to Disneyland. And I used to draw Disneyland, map it out exactly how we were going to do Disneyland. And for me, Mickey, the iconography of Mickey Mouse, and growing up with Warner Brothers cartoons were right there. I went to school with Ruth Clampett. Her father was Bob Clampett, who was one of the original Warner Brothers directors. Just living with that legacy. And then also, my character Toby is named after a real girl who I was in love with, who lived in Studio City. So every day, every weekend when we would go visit her, we would drive by Hanna-Barbera. So having the Flintstones, the Jetsons, everything around you, for me, it was my legacy. And not only was I, as a little kid, I'm going to be an artist, I'm going to be the best artist, the one who's going to take over that throne as when I grow up as an artist, in a way.
Yeah. But you've done designer toys, you've done luxury fashion collabs. What do you want to do next?
I have big dreams. So even though drawing to me is like breathing, and with me with sketchbooks, I draw pretty much everywhere I go. I'm kind of obsessive about it. Growing worlds is what I really want to do. For me, I want to create a world that people can engage in, that people want to fall into, and actually discover something new about themselves.
Love that.
My art is much larger than the way it's perceived. It looks cute. There's a lot of people that may be doing what you think is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But the reality is I'm a fine artist that when I think, when I draw, when I create, I'm trying to discover a human truth. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to work conceptually in understanding our condition and where we are in the world.
Yeah.
But by the time I create the actual art and the way it engages, this ends up having such a playfulness that it has a commercial component.
When did you start picking up your everyday kind of sketching? How many sketchbooks do you have in your house?
Well, this one is sketchbook 157.
157.
In my lifetime. I always paint the front and the back, all depending on
amazing.
The themes that I'm working on at the time.
Yeah.
But then when I was traveling, so I just got back from Spain and France, and so wherever I was eating, wherever I was going, I'm documenting this.
Beautiful.
And it's really lovely. If I go to a restaurant and I sit for 3 hours and I'm having vermouth and anchovies or wherever I'm eating, by the end of the meal, I'm friends. I know the waiters. I know their history. I know the owners.
And now they're in your sketchbook.
And they're in my and they exist. They're immortal now.
I think, Ethan, you have an experience with
Absolutely.
Gary sketching for you.
When you came to first meet with us, you had drawing after drawing
Right.
When you talk about worlds, it's funny that you say, hey, my vision for where I'm going in the future is worlds, when that's part of your work from the start. Like, you look at every piece of your fine art, and it's depth. There's storytelling, there's characters. You have a whole universe of characters. And when you were trying to express kind of what you wanted to work on with us, it was all sketches. It was all visual, right?
Right.
And even so, that we met at an art gallery one time, and I don't know if you remember this.
Of course I remember.
But I introduced my daughter to you, and the first thing
she's amazing.
She had a sketchbook with her, and you're like, please, can I see that? You drew her an amazing sketch in your sketchbook.
No,
She loves it.
before I did that, I wanted to look at her work.
Yeah.
And she was so talented. And then I said, hey, and I asked her if I could collaborate with her and actually put something in there. So then I decided I want, for me, I want to be as supportive as those elders when I was a kid that were supportive of my work. Like, if it wasn't for somebody like Bob Clampett, or even, who created Beanie and Cecil, who also back in the day, Mattel did all his products.
Yeah.
But then also Sergio Aragonis from Mad Magazine. When I was in high school, I won a city award for my art. I think Stanley was also a judge. And it wasn't for these guys who didn't show support to me. It gave me the affirmation and just the confidence to be what I am.
I think so many artists try to develop their own style. That's like what they're always trying to figure out. And so I'm curious, did you just have your style to start with? Has it evolved through the years?
It always evolves.
Yeah.
From being a little kid. You have certain loves, and as long as hopefully you have the support. And then also through elementary school, Mr. Merkelson, my 6th grade teacher, who still has my original art from when I was a kid, he was so supportive. Shapiro and junior high school let me do what I wanted to do. And then Mr. Cameron also in high school. So I was very supportive. And in public school, to have that kind of support.
Yeah.
And then from there, growing as an artist, from first just drawing what I was doing. I drew for Fairfax High. I drew for UCLA. Drew the Bruin. I drew the Fairfax Lion. And then it started turning into, after college, really trying to mature as an artist. And then using almost like music. Somebody like David Bowie or somebody like Leonard Cohen, taking my work and trying to turn it in a more poetic way.
Yeah.
And then, but at the same time, being a problem solver conceptually.
Is there a highlight in your career that you can pinpoint?
There's so many highlights. Again, I created the characters for the game Cranium, and I did that for 10 years while the company existed and grew. And they kept hiring amazing people who understood gameplay, these producers. So every time they would create a new version of Cranium, if it was for little kids like Caribou or Kadu, I was part of the process, and it was, again, really special. Having my first cover for the New Yorker was beautiful. It was for David Remnick. I was able to talk him into publishing it because there was a little bit of an edge to it. It was for Mother's Day, and it was a little bird bringing his mom breakfast in bed. It just happened to be his 2 little brothers. So, and they were like scrambled eggs, or eggs sunny side up, and she was a little shocked. But also, the week that I had my first New Yorker cover, I was nominated for my first Emmy, my first one of 3 Emmys. And
the BAFTA came later.
And the BAFTA came after.
Of course.
And I didn't think I would ever win the Emmy, and it was like the same week. So I wanted to enjoy the New Yorker cover for that moment, knowing that once the Emmys came and went and I lost, even though you have no control over it, I knew I was going to be sad, but I ended up winning both.
Oh my
so
God.
Both of that. And then the year after, I won 2 Emmys.
Yeah.
And having double fisting Emmys. And
now you're working with Mattel. I mean, that has to be a career highlight, right?
And there is a legacy there that I'm excited to be a part of.
Yeah.
And to expand on it if I can.
Yeah.
So I've had a lot of special, memories with my art. And, my first museum show at the Skirball, where I had an 8,000 square foot space.
Wow.
And I was celebrating my neighborhood I grew up in, the Fairfax district, and my parents, who were both Holocaust survivors, by creating a home in the middle of the museum. So to create a space that people can come and sit in my parents' sofas and dining room set and bedroom set, but mixed with my art all around
cool.
in a way to let people know. The title of the exhibition was "The Door Was Always Open," which was a phrase that my father would always tell me in his broken English, that his home was always going to be my home. And to create a space where everyone can come into my home and have them into my home is the home of creativity. So if they grew up with parents telling them they had to be an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer, if they're in my home, all bets are off and they can be as creative as they want.
We're at VCon right now, and there's tons of people walking around, creators, future creators. What type of advice would you give to artists or creators coming up?
The biggest advice is, which is simple, is being authentic, working really hard, not giving up, making yourself available, keeping yourself open, knowing how to collaborate. A lot of it is also like riding the wave. So how to be able to deal with life and what life can throw you, how to make it work, but then also looking deep inside yourself. And if whatever product you're creating, but for me, my product is basically just myself, it's art, is how to get that out and how to be able to touch people in an authentic way and inspire them.
I mean, that's incredible advice, because having worked with you for a little while now, you embody that. Like every one of those things about like working really, really hard, being open to things, being flexible, but having clarity of vision. Working with you has been an absolute pleasure because of all of those things. That's what true collaboration is about.
Right.
Right? And then, I'm very excited sometime in the future for people to learn what we've been working on.
I'm excited watching you guys work together on this in the future collaboration. So that kind of brings us to the whole topic of the what's next with Mattel Creations. What's next for Gary Baseman?
Well, immediately, the thing that I'm most excited about is a storybook that my cat, Blackie, the cat, wrote about 9 years ago. It's a story of his family and heritage.
Yeah.
And it's a story that is so appropriate now, of two different sides that literally hate each other and have good reason to hate each other, but how do we come together? And so it's a story of this great hate between the black cats and the red elephants, which is actually based on a true story. Another thing is this guy, Toby, is turning 20 next year.
Oh my goodness.
So he has his 20th anniversary. So I'm finding ways on how to celebrate him being my alter ego in the world. And
you're dressed similarly today almost.
Exactly.
Matching color scheme.
Exactly. And we both have the black nose. And then also what we're doing next year, I'm really excited about too.
Yes.
Right,
What
yes.
is your best fan engagement, and what was your weirdest fan engagement you've ever gotten?
Well, the best fan engagement's kind of a little easier. The weirdest, I had to go through my phone because I keep a little folder for like fan art and things like that. But the best fan engagement with the growth of social media, I started developing a talk show with my cat, Blackie, who was a talking cat. He had a triple purr. So we did a lot of things together. We did something called the Purr Room together, where we created like a sound bath for his purr that people would go into a faux fur structure, lay in a cat bed. I did, and and again, when I lost him, I honored him by having a 3,600 square foot exhibition in Beijing, celebrating his life and teachings. But when his health was getting bad, and I'm a public person, but I'm not usually that public with things that are that personal. And I was going through his health issues and losing him and having him go in, and he came back and he got better. But the fans, even before he was sick, even when at the height of his talk show around 2018-19, I would get the most lovely DMs from people talking about how they loved the daily camaraderie and conversation that I would have. Because we would talk about love and life and conflict and politics together. Okay, so then what is the weirdest fan engagement? So then I started looking, because I couldn't think of it. But there's a lot of fan nails. There's a lot of nail art.
Like nail art.
Nail art.
Yeah.
but a lot of them will do Gary Baseman nail art.
Oh, that's cool.
So that's kind of interesting.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for
We
coming.
appreciate it. We're looking forward to working with you more. And make sure you stay tuned to Mattel Creations to find out what's next. Bye.